If we go back to Title Update 5, I believe it was, the developers decided that they were going to drastically change the way that the Defender drone actually performed. And what they ended up doing was going from a immune state where the Defender drone would actually block certain numbers of bullets and that would actually drain away its duration. And instead they went to a more rounded approach where they basically, just reduced the damage slightly from the bullets that were hitting you. Now, in some ways, this might be seen as a beneficial thing. It might be seen as more interesting, maybe less OP, especially in PvP. But overall, it never really interests me. And the biggest factor of this was just, as a full skill build, you could go into this, just full investment into the Defender drone, and it really wouldn't do poop for you. I mean, you were just way too weak, didn't really have any benefit. There was no build you could really make with a Defender drone at tier 6 that would actually give you any sort of meaningful power. Now you could make, maybe a few hybrids that use the Defender drone and you could pretend that it was a good build, but overall, it really wasn't. And because of this, I've pretty much avoided it since they changed it. As I said in my last video, I've been basically just using random things just to have fun with the game. I don't really care if it works or if it doesn't work. I'm just using it and seeing if it's, fun or not. That's basically it. However, the main thing that I really kind of wanted to do with the Defender drone first and foremost was actually try to figure out, what the numbers actually mean, if it's actually working as intended, if there's any way you can buff it, make it better, and, just obviously empower it so that it's a better skill to use on really any build. Well, unfortunately, after testing it out in the Dark Zone, I can honestly say that the Defender drone does not get any sort of significant buff from the Artificer Hive, and it gets absolutely no benefit from the Memento backpack. So this means that skill efficiency really has no effect on the Defender drone besides for reducing the cooldown and giving it a little bit more health. The Artificer Hive, again, doesn't really give it that much benefit. Yes, it does keep the duration up as long as you're not in a building where the Artificer Hive does not work, and you're also healing it, I guess, if it takes damage, but that's really not very big of a worry. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about what I'm using. The Artificer Hive might not necessarily be a mandatory item for you. Now, the first build that I was actually testing it out on, using it a lot with, was basically just a simple Hunter's Fury Memento backpack, future perfect build. And to be honest, it works a lot better than I actually thought it would. Now, of course, the basic theory behind this build is that, I get the one skill tier from my Tactician specialization, I get another skill tier from my Memento backpack, and I'm also getting one skill tier from one of my Hunter Fury pieces because I rolled skill tier onto the holster. So that puts me at skill tier 3 right off the bat. Then, of course, my main weapon is going to be my T821 with Future Perfect, which will build up to 3 more. So I can get tier 6 on my Artificer Hive and tier 6 on my Defender drone. Now, this build helps compensate for the lack of healing abilities by basically giving me that armor on kill from the Hunter's Fury. Plus, I also get 3% armor regen when my Memento backpack is fully buffed from, collecting those dog tags. Now, to be honest, the build does work really well together. Obviously, I'm healing when I kill enemies. When I kill an enemy, I, apply Disorient to any enemy that's within 5 meters. I'm also building damage stacks for, critical hits with my Obliterate. And of course, that just fits in really well with my SMG, just because, when you're using the gear sets, obviously you don't have as many attribute rolls. So you don't really want to waste all of those rolls on getting as much, crit hit chance as you can. You want to try to invest in as much crit hit damage and basically just use crit chance as kind of a filler. While I did like using this setup, I couldn't help but feel that there was just something kind of missing from it. Now, armor on kill is, a very beneficial thing when you're killing, lots of enemies who are all within close range of each other, and you're basically just chaining those kills over and over and over again. However, there's plenty of missions where the enemies are spread out. You have to run from one spawn point to another, and, they're coming out of multiple spawn points. And at times like those, it definitely gets a little bit annoying because, this build is built around keeping that Defender drone fully buffed from Future Perfect. If you don't, you're taking a lot more damage, and if you're trying to rush up to enemies, of course you can see the conundrum in that aspect. So, if you're not killing the enemies, then you're not really getting that health back. And then if you're taking more damage than, then you can regenerate from just the Memento, you're obviously going to, fall down. So with that into consideration, I kind of decided that, I really wanted to play around with a more distance-based version of this build. something that's not dependent on rushing up to the enemies and just basically face tanking everything into the ground. For this reason, I decided to go with the Memento backpack and basically 5 high-end pieces. So I went with 2 Golan gear. Obviously, that gives me, armor regen. I went with Belstone armory, again for 1% armor regen. And then I went with the Murikami named kneepads for another 1% armor regeneration. Now, of course, I still have Future Perfect on my weapons. I've got Obliterate on my chest piece. I've got, crit chance, crit damage, and I've also got, a few rolls of armor regen on the build itself. Now, while I'm not getting the massive amount of armor on kill that I was with Hunter's Fury, I am getting a more constant, generally more reliable source of healing. As long as my Memento is at 30 stacks, I am getting 6% armor regeneration per second. Now, while it may not be as strong as a sudden burst from killing an enemy or two with Hunter's Fury, I don't really need to rely on killing the enemy. So if I get into a long distance gun battle and the enemy's constantly ducking and I'm low on health, I don't have to worry about, okay, I need to kill him soon or I'm going to get dropped. I can sit there, wait for him to peek up, and during that entire time, I am regenerating much more armor than I was in the first build. The other thing that this does is it kind of allows you to play with any future perfect weapon that you would want. So if you actually wanted to go with a rifle, or if you wanted to go with a marksman rifle, you could actually do that. You could make a rather tanky sniper build, and you have the defender drone to, keep you alive. You have that regen to keep you alive, and you can keep a lot of distance and not really have to worry about, being counter sniped or being, one tapped from a little bit further away. So, there's a couple things you could do with it. There's a couple ways you could play around with the setup. You don't have to use, these pieces specifically. But like I say, with a lot of the, high end versus the gear set, builds, the high end definitely allows you a lot more customization. You can go in and kind of nitpick what you want, what you don't want. If there's something that's just underperforming a little bit, you can get rid of it and change it out for something else and make a build that suits what you're trying to do a little bit better than, a gear set is designed to. Obviously, a gear set like Hunter's Fury is designed with the intention to use an SMG, use a shotgun, rush up, face tank things. I mean, that is the whole purpose of that build. If that is not exactly what you want to play with, if you don't want to have to be within 15 meters all the time, then obviously the high-end version will just be much better for your basic needs. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say that the Defender Drone is my favorite skill of all time. In fact, it's probably in the, lower 50% of skills that I actually like to use. The reason for this is the fact that you can't really directly increase the actual reduction of damage that it has. So you only get the option to invest into, skill tier, and that's the only real buff you can get to the drone. Because of this, it doesn't really inspire me to use it very much. There's not really any spectacular thing you can do with it, that just kind of makes it, unique or sets it apart from everyone else. It's, you have to have, skill tier 6, and basically you can only do that in 2 ways. Future Perfect or having, a bunch of skill tiers on your gear. Now, like I said, you don't necessarily need to use the Artificer Hive. You don't necessarily need to use the Technician. You could change those out and, still have a Defender drone that is relatively competent. You could just invest in more skill tier on your actual gear and then just use a different specialization. I mean, there's other options you can do. You don't have to necessarily use it the way that I do. You could invest into other things if that's what you want. A good option could be the shield because, you can pull out your shield. When it gets destroyed, you can basically activate your Defender drone, or right before it gets destroyed, you activate your Defender drone. And then generally speaking, your Defender drone will have a long enough duration that your shield will actually come back. So you can end up flipping back to your shield after your drone's about to die. But I just think that the Artificer Hive, just constantly refreshing the duration, generally allows it to get through a full battle. So you can get through a room, clear it out, and then just destroy the Defender drone without having to worry about, downtime in between. But again, that's not something that's completely necessary. If you're more of a, take your time approach, you could just sit in cover and wait for the Defender drone to, come back and, not have to worry about it at all. You could also be using, a healing skill with the Defender drone. So, there's different options there, stuff to play around with. But when I'm trying to actually fight the enemies, the last thing I really want to think about is managing my skill cooldowns on a build that's not necessarily designed for using the skills. So, this is kind of a hybrid DPS type build where I just want to focus on shooting the enemy and, staying alive, not really juggling my skills to make sure that, everything's properly in balance. But either way, if you guys haven't tried the Defender drone recently, or you just never even bothered to touch it, it might be something that you actually have fun with, and at least something, different than what you normally use. So if you are a hardcore shield build user, you might actually have some fun with the Defender drone, just because it is another type of defensive-based skill, which those tend to be the kind of skills that I actually like to use the most. But either way, thank you guys for watching. I'll see you in the next one.